Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise TV. It is time now for us to devote a sizable chunk of this program to the latest installment of the Obasanjo letters. If that's what you like to call them, a euphemism that would most likely fit with former president's seasonal reminders and call to action to his successors in office. The former president started out this week by firing another one across to President Buhari, bemoaning the rising spate of insecurity in the land and what he sees as President Buhari's lack of effort or unwillingness to arrest the situation. He put President Buhari's unhelpful body language down to his affinity with nomadic herdsmen who share the same Fulani ethnic ancestry with him. Unsurprisingly, Mieti Allah, the umbrella body of these headsmen, are being reported in the press this morning as calling for the arrest of former President Obasanjo. Well, joining us this morning to take a look at the letter and the responses is Akin Osuntokun, a former managing director of the News Agency of Nigeria and a man who also served as political advisor to former President Olusegun Obasanjo. Welcome to the program, Akin Osuntokun.
Didn't include the fact that I'm a member of the editorial board of this day.
Yes. Yeah,
and a columnist.
Yes, and a columnist, yes. Now, the very recent letter, which was written yesterday. Now, many who have responded feel that letter is alarmist. When you hear words like genocide, possibility of a genocide program in the country, if certain measures are not taken.
Well, I don't know what you mean by alarmist.
That's how some people see the letter.
Well, certainly the way Nigeria is trending, it's not. It's a description or a potential that people typically, attribute to the slide Nigeria is engaged in. Of course, he didn't say that in vacuum. He said it against the backdrop of incessant, killings that has ethnic or intertribal motives, which kind of attained a new momentum, in the killing, in the murder of the daughter of the leader of Afenifere group, Friday. It's not only him who is raising the alarm. In fact, any Nigerian patriot should do so. You don't wait till the whole thing collapses on you. That's the role of a leader and a patriot. In any case, he also has access to information and intelligence that you may not have. He's an international statesman, so he has all the makeup. He has the wherewithal to have an helicopter view of the situation in Nigeria today. I'm saying that first we can derive it logically. It's like I'm sure this day has written editorials and carried news reports that just the way you are classifying what he said as alarmist. That is the reality of the Nigerian situation. It's like looking yourself in the mirror. If you don't like the image that is being reflected, it is not the fault of the mirror. It's just what or who you are. What happened on Friday has the potential, to generate a backlash. Suppose people took laws into their hands. The Afenifere is a legitimate and well-rooted Yoruba organization. It's the foremost, So if the daughter of the leader is killed in an accident, and you can validly, I'm not saying that is what happened, you can validly attribute it or connect it, to the spirit of, the political degeneration and intertribal killings. That could easily spark the followership who are less restrained. I mean, there's a category of followership that are less restrained. What if they start killing those they see as belonging to the ethnic group of the killers? So it's not that, I mean, I don't see it as alarmist. I mean, after, giving his own opinion on what is going of the interpretation, he also gave what could be done, what can be done to stem the tide, and kind of reset Nigeria on a positive momentum.
Well, some have questioned the method at which the former president reaches out to incumbent President Muhammadu Buhari, and they also say in the last elections, the former president did not hide his sympathy for the opposition PDP and its candidate, openly endorsing him, doing a 360 from what he had said previously about him. And so they question that these concerns raised and the solutions proffered cannot be seen as one not coming from a partisan elder statesman. How do you react to those?
Does it matter where a good advice comes from? I mean, if Atiku himself, I mean, the opponent of President Buhari, suggests a course of action that is good, that has a potential to restore Nigeria back to, should you not concentrate on the message rather than the messenger? It is the content of what is in the letter, that is relevant. Of course, I mean, he has a personality and reputation that, he also was of protecting. One of the qualities of the reputation that he has is that, look, he is not liable to frivolous statement. And, that if he sees things going wrong, he will point it out and then go ahead. As I said, I mean, he has access. I don't know how many Nigerians who have the kind of access to information, to intelligence, both within and outside Nigeria as himself. I don't really know any other person who has that kind of wherewithal. So you've got to take what he says seriously. But most importantly, look at the content of what he said. If you can fault it, I mean, if that is at this period, it doesn't matter. The fact that Nigeria should even be gratified that you have that kind of person, who can come up, who can enter a cautionary note and not be liable to being dismissed as rantings or whatever it is. So your party doesn't. I don't think the question of being partisan during the election comes to. It's just like me, for instance. I mean, I can advance arguments. I can think independently of my partisan position. I mean, so talk less of somebody at his own level. I mean, embassies, foreigners, a lot of people consult him about Nigeria, right? And of course, he's not expected. I mean, rather, he's expected to give them an intelligent, non-colored or prejudiced or biased information about Nigeria. If he has not been doing that, he won't have the kind of reputation that he has. I mean, people go to him, embassies and diplomats in Nigeria, members of the international community. If they want to know what is going on in Nigeria, they will seek the benefit of his opinion.
Okay, so let's look at the content, because we should look at the message and not the messenger. He talked about addressing the grievances of the Fulanis, if any, and if legitimate, they should be brought out to the open. and dealt with, and so with other tribes. It's in the letter. What do you think is the demand of the Fulanis at this time, if any?
Well, you know, and that is obvious. I mean, well, the most conspicuous, or the most, is the fact that they have their means, those categories of Fulani, not as a matter of fact, not all, right, but a subset of the Fulani population whose occupation is cattle breeding, livestock business, right? And that business has come to, is being obstructed. I mean, it's facing bad, it's facing a crisis. You know, it's facing a crisis of supply or maintenance of that means of livelihood, livestock. The crisis has many dimensions. Some people say that desertification is part of it. The encroachment of some attributes say that, look, the general insecurity in the middle belts and large parts of the north accounts for it. And the general trending in Nigeria towards, you know, widespread insecurity. So that is the crisis that we feel. Now, from that analysis or statement of the crisis, you can now extrapolate how do you respond now to those concerns, fears that they have. So that is what brought about all this idea of Ruga, livestock something, giving some people, compensating people with money, and all that kind of thing, which ironically have also generated their own crisis. But that is a response to the kind of the problem. If you want to isolate or extrapolate what they are demanding, you could get it from those things that, look, their source of living is endangered. And endangered by factors that are beyond individual control, you know, namely, you know, the...
Sorry to cut you short. Please keep that line of thought. We'll go on a short break and we'll come back to discuss some more. Stay with us. You're still watching the Morning Show here on the Rise News. Mr. Akin Osuntokun, former managing director of the News Agency of Nigeria, a man who also served as political advisor to former President Olusegun Obasanjo, is with us in the studios today. Also a member of the editorial board for This Day newspapers, talking about President Olusegun's latest letter to President Muhammad Buhari. Stephanie, you had a question?
Yes. Now, President Obasanjo also talked about the stick and carrot approach in dealing with the insecurity situation in the country. I don't know whether you can shed some light on that. Is that what the government has not been doing? Because we thought the government has been dialoguing with a lot of money has been spent in the Northeast to provide facilities, building of schools and all that. While the war against insurgency is on, but it's also re-emphasizing the need for stick and carrot approach.
Well, that's a standard prescription for responding to crisis and conflict situation. It's an admixture that's a balanced admixture. You know, both the carrotist and carrot. You also have preventive. You have curative. You have deterrence. You know, and so it's all a complete package of addressing any crisis situation. So to that extent, there is nothing really peculiar about what he's saying. And of course, the government is doing that. I mean, the idea of coming up with, which has generated a lot of controversy, the idea of coming up with establishing or building more or less settlements across the country in which the Fulani can address both their social and business life together. That's what you may call a carrot, or the rumored compensation of money to them. So, and the stick, of course, is the heavy hand of the law. I mean, it's like, if you are caught, you'll be dealt with. So what he's saying is a standard prescription, for any crisis situation. But specifically in Nigeria, those are the areas, the manifestations of how that has been administered. But of course, the point about this crisis is it tends to be cyclical, right? In responding to that crisis, the government itself seems to be generating another one, right? The manner of the administration of the response, like this Ruga thing, and of course, people are asking the question whether a private business, should have should be given preferential treatment or subsidized by the government, because essentially that is what it is about, the cattle breeding. And that if you want to take the logic of that governmental response to its conclusion, what he says is that, look, I'm also entitled, every businessman, if you are a farmer, if you are a tailor, if you are a journalist, you are also entitled to, that is, if you want to stretch the logic of what the government is doing, that which is true. I mean, there is no legal basis as such for doing so. So, people are using favoritism, and of course, the context in which these things are taking place, has also bred this kind of crisis and controversy. The lopsidedness of whatever. The president himself is almost perennially, criticized for discriminating in favor of people from his own political constituency. So that is what, but I don't know. I mean, what matters most at this stage is good faith, and find a way of de-escalating the tension in the country, right? Because what is magnifying the crisis itself is the general state of political crisis in the country, large-scale insecurity, and of course, so when all these things, you get confused, you have a situation of almost a perfect storm. You have where general insecurity now is almost getting synonymous in certain parts of the country with the banditry allegedly carried out by the Fulanis, and of course, that the identification of that identity itself has become an issue. That, okay, if you say Fulani herdsmen, you are not thereby generalizing that all Fulanis are guilty. Of course not. But by the same token, you have to take the statement of the victim into consideration. If a victim of an attack says that, look, these people that I saw or that attacked me are Fulani herdsmen, and you have that view almost generalized or cutting across almost all the victims. Now, should I then be, because that, take away that, you are not the one, you are reporting what happened to you. A university professor said so when he was kidnapped. A former secretary to the government of the Federation, Chief Falai, said so, and was even angry that, look, he's not stupid. If he was taken away for weeks, he has maximum exposure all over the country. At his level and given his experience, he should be able to identify accurately those who kidnapped him. So this is the issue, and it's unfortunate, but and of course that is in the respect that people now talk about genocide and all kind of things. That if crime, that level of crime, is being attributed validly to a set of, and they themselves, from the kind of thing they say, the statements that are issued or whatever it is, they tend to appropriate, maybe until now. I mean, they said they would kind of say, okay, if you don't do this, we will come for a revenge attack. So there is a context in which all this is taking place. And that context, that wider context has to be addressed. If you take away the Fulani crisis, you still find in Nigeria a political and economic crisis.
So in the letter, and like you've rightly said, the president was being accused of mismanaging or poor management of the diversity of Nigeria. Moving forward, how can President Muhammadu Buhari demonstrate leadership for all, being the leader for all? And then just to follow up on Mr. Efeni's question earlier, talking about the carrot and stick approach, when you read that paragraph of the letter, you can almost interpret it to say former President Olusegun Obasanjo was drawing a direct correlation between insecurity, the level of poverty, and illiteracy in the Northeast. But isn't there over-concentration on governance from Abuja? What about the state governments in the Northeast? Should they not take part of this blame? That I did not see in the letter.
No, of course, you see, that is the wider context I was talking about. There is people, I'm sure you must have had it, probably the most typical point of reference these days is that Nigeria needs restructuring, to be restructured towards what we say we are practicing, and that is federalism. Now, a lot of contradictions arise. You are going to happen one. That is the role of the states, vis-a-vis the federal government. Now, the states, which you rightly said, are expected and constitutionally ascribed to take responsibility for the state of security in their state. As a matter of fact, the governor is designated as chief security officer of the state. But then you have this contradiction that the police in the states, they are not responsible to the governor. They are responsible to the IG, the headquarters in Abuja, which is a specific manifestation of the problem that people are talking about. You need to respond to that. You need to redress that because it has become a source of security crisis. First, crisis or security is best addressed at the local, state, and federal level. The security at the local level should not be the responsibility of the concern of the people in Abuja.
We'll come back to talk more about this and how President Muhammadu Buhari can carry everybody along in this term. But after this break, please stay with us. Mr. Osuntokun is still with us in the studios. Just before the break, I was asking about the over-concentration of power in the center in Abuja and how the state government seem to be taking a vacation every time we have situations like this. And in that letter, I did not see reference to the importance of state governments, in addressing these challenges. But I also, and you've touched on that, but I also asked you about President Muhammadu Buhari's ability to become a leader for all when we talk about the mismanagement or poor management of our diversity as highlighted in our letter. Emmanuel, you wanted to add something?
Yes, if I may just chip in this before you answer. Now, in this letter, the president is also, the former president is also calling for a kind of national dialogue or a national conference. Now, do we need a national conference when we have reports of past national conference that we can act on?
Well, that's a valid position to take. But, the thing about government in Nigeria, and especially this government, is to discredit and demonize, whatever your predecessor has done, not giving it any benefit. So you heard what the president said, not long when he resumed in 2015. He was asked about this question. There's a report that was generated from the Constitutional Conference of 2014 under the presidency of President Jonathan. And he said he will keep it in the archives. You know, that was what he said. And of course, subsequently, they then tended towards being positive by setting what they call the El-Rufai Committee, you know, to look essentially at the same problem. And of course, as I said, well, look, this is repetition of what, you know, because if you look at the report of the El-Rufai Committee, all what they were saying there was also contained, you know, in the report 24. To that extent, there is there. But, you know, the reason I agree with you that there is really no need, you know, I mean, there is hardly any need if we are doing things properly, if the people in government can be trusted to have this attitude that, look, there's already a report that has a fair amount of legitimacy because the representation at that conference was widespread. It represented almost all the political constituencies in the country at the highest level. Remember that the chairman of the conference was the former Chief Justice, Kutigi. You know, so there was the first-class traditional rulers who were there. You remember the Lamido of Adama was there. You know, many people with conflicting or contradictory positions were there. And at the end of the day, they were able to reach compromises. So all these things should have, you know, recommended, you know, the adoption of that report as a basis for going forward. But, you know, the reason why this problem is, you know, is accelerating, of course, is that, which is what you have said. I mean, that the President Buhari, you know, almost everybody knows, I mean, tell him that, look, you are not sufficiently, your government is not sufficiently inclusive. You've got to do something about it. Now, the problem, of course, is that if you have in Abuja, if you have a president who there's this general consensus that, you know, is parochial, discriminatory, not inclusive. When these kind of problems occur, it magnifies, because the person who is there, people don't even have the belief or faith in him to do it. And the kind of actions that he takes almost regularly, on a regular basis, tend to perpetrate this. Look at now the constitution of his staff, of his personal staff and things like that. You go through the list of about 15 appointees, and about two or three people come from the south, and they are photographers, you know. So this is, you know, you see this in even his supporters. You know, I've started people were, look, because of the situation we find ourselves, that maybe the president will now see the need to send positive signals. On the contrary, right? What you get is, you know. So it's unfortunate, but look, I've always told people that, look, you don't predicate the success of a constitution or governance on the person who is there. You don't do that as an ideology or constitutional principle, right? Which is why you have federalism that, look, what if, even if you have a good person, I'm not talking about Buhari, you don't presume that you always have good people, right? If you want to have a foolproof design of a mechanism of government, you assume or presume the worst case scenario, right? That if you go in the US, their own constitution with emphasis on checks and balances and separation of power is actually a presumption that bad people will be in government. So you need to come up with devices of reining their excesses in. Of course, if you have good people in government, that is a bonus. But suppose you don't have, and you don't have what can contain the excesses of that person. So this is the reason why, especially in Nigeria today, where people are saying, look, the way to address this problem, you identified it too, is that, look, there is this over-concentration and centralization of power in Abuja, right? The people, the British government gave back to Nigeria, you know, in consultation with the founding fathers of Nigeria, came up with this prescription of federalism. You know, it was thrown aside, violated by a military, you know. Now, are you saying that the coup, those who do the coup, the 6 or 7 ringleaders, are in a position to give us, because what they did in 1966 is what Nigeria has been using and reinforcing since that time. You know, they took Nigeria from 4 regions to 36 states. No state, none of these 36 states were created under civilian, you know. And of course, the essence of the military is unification and centralization. So they did a lot, you know, violations of the Nigerian constitution by, you know, now impounding and, you know, appropriating more and more powers to the center. Now, this was what was handed to the, when they were transiting to civilian. And then, of course, it generates all these kind of problems and crises.
Do you see a situation where both men will sit down and, you know, trash out these issues and bring a lasting solution? Do you see a situation where former President Olusegun Obasanjo will sit down at the table, President Muhammad Buhari sit down at the table, and then talk this matter, really, instead of open letters?
Yes, because many have said he has access to the president. He's a member of the Council of State. So why this open letter? Why not go to him?
And he also suggested that the president should invite those that can help the situation, and that's the reason why he wrote the open letter, so that people who can help weigh into the matter can do so. But do you see a situation where former President Olusegun Obasanjo will be part of this solution he's talking about?
That is up to President Buhari. There is nobody the president will invite to come and seek his opinion that will not go. So it's not the fault of the president. You know, it's the President Buhari himself who you should blame for that.
A President Obasanjo who was absent at the inauguration, absent at the Democracy Day celebration.
That in itself was meant to be a criticism of what he was doing. It wasn't only him. It was all the former presidents. And they did it individually. That is a statement of consensus that something is wrong with the president. That is all. All of them, including Gawan, who attended the inauguration. He was the only one who attended the inauguration. All of them kept away. So if that happens, I mean, that is the consensus. That is the kind of consensus in Nigeria, that something is wrong with your government, and you are not doing anything genuinely to address it. Well, of course, I know that. I know that the President Obasanjo, former president, made efforts to, you know, and so it's not. I mean, it has come to this before he writes his open letters, because really that is the only option that is left for him to do so. And of course, he's also through that letter addressing himself to the country. It was not only the president he was communicating to. There are portions of it that are also directed at all opinion leaders in the country, the media, and, you know, how you manage the kind of the situation we are in. So the letter was not singularly or directed to the president. A large chunk of it is, but that was a last resort. It's not the first option he's exercising. That is the last resort. And of course, they had been together. I mean, for him to take recourse to this, is a sad commentary on, you know, because they are both military. They come a long way, right? Both of them, you know, had a long military career, you know, and on top of that, they served in the same military government together. He was the one who appointed the president now as the Federal Commissioner for Petroleum when he was military head of state. In the same capacity before Murtala died, I think, this president served as the military governor of Northeast under him. So they go back a long way, you know, and if you have that kind of long relation, something must have happened, you know, for you to take this course to. And it's another thing for me to talk with you, to offer my advice. It's another thing for you to respond, to utilize it. If you invite me or I come to see you and said, give you the benefit of my opinion, and immediately I leave, you threw it aside, or it's not reflected in a way you are. So those are the things that put people off. Right? That I'm sure, as I said, it's not only the President Obasanjo. Most people complain about it. You know, that, and of course, there's also the dimension of incompetence, you know, which aggravates, you know, where if you have, if incompetence, if you add incompetence to a situation of, you know, deteriorating widespread security crisis, it aggravates it. Ministers have not been appointed, for instance.
President Buhari is the president for the next 4 years, all things being equal. In what will you advise him to do based on what you have just analyzed? If you were to talk to President Buhari himself now, to do in the light of all we've been saying all morning?
Well, I will advise him, you know, to pursue the implementation of the report of the 2014 Constitutional Conference. If he has any objection to that, the second option I will give him is what the former president had represented. Okay, you can convene your own. You know, I mean, it is still better than doing nothing. I mean, it's still, if whatever it is, reservations you have, in any case, you know, Nigeria is like that. You have a litany of policy prescriptions all over. But people pretend as if this is a new problem. But that is my own first option in terms of making recommendation to him, will be to retrieve the report of the 2014 Constitutional Conference and set to, you know, implement it in good faith. Because you see, if they can say that, you know, it is the National Assembly that will do this, knowing fully well that it is not likely to, you need the buy-in of whoever is the president to pursue that kind of thing, to drive it. If a president is disinterested in the merely just do whatever you want to do with it, of course, it's dead on arrival. That's interpreted as a negative. So the president needs a buy-in into the idea of, you know, driving the constitutional review, a review of the Nigerian Constitution, or, you know, maximally, you know, getting a brand new one.
Well, that's a very good place to leave it. Thank you so much, Mr. Akin Osuntokun, for coming on the program this morning. Thank you so much.